Yo, partnership alert, partnership alert, partnership alert. Living Corporate has a partnership with LinkedIn Learning, an American massive open online course provider that provides video courses taught by industry experts across a wide array of subjects. Now, the partnership is because Living Corporate has courses on LinkedIn Learning focused on diversity, equity, inclusion for leaders, career professionals, and anyone really looking to upskill themselves and be better allies. So make sure you check out our courses on LinkedIn Learning by clicking the link in the show notes. And let's just say you don't want to do that. When you go to LinkedIn Learning on LinkedIn, search Living Corporate. We'll be right there. All right. Peace. What's up, y'all? It's Zach with Living Corporate. And, we bring on, if you notice it, if you're a long time listener, you know this, but maybe it's your first time listening to Living Corporate. And, I'll tell you now, Living Corporate is a digital media network. We exist to center and amplify Black and brown folks at work. And we do that by having really frank, authentic conversations with all types of people, from executives to entrepreneurs to activists to elected officials to authors, to different types of public servants, right? We talk to all kinds of folks. And if you've been listening to Living Corporate for any amount of time, you'll notice that we talk to a lot of HR influencers, thought leaders, and executives, and just other professionals in the HR space. And the reason for that is because for still a large majority of these organizations, HR is the closest thing to employee advocacy that Black and brown folks have. And even as you probably hear me say that, you're saying, but HR isn't here to really support employees. They're here to protect the company. And I would say you're right. And that's why if you listen to Living Corporate and you listen to our conversations, we're typically challenging how HR needs to be fundamentally reimagined, which is, again, a much more radical concept than you may like to think. It's actually quite a bit of work to really change human resources, because human resources was always created with the intention to protect the power structure that company had set up, whatever that power structure is. And typically that power structure is white supremacist. And so I'm excited about today's conversation because we talked to Lars Schmidt. Lars Schmidt is a lot of things, but ultimately his brand is centered around the concept of redefining HR. And so he and I connected some months ago, a while ago actually. And he was gracious enough to have me on his podcast. So make sure you check it out. I'll put the links in the show notes. And we had this conversation a little while ago, still relevant though. We talk about just this era and this season, particularly as you think about this influx of talent, this Gen Z talent, a lot of Black and brown folks, and really what does human resources need to do? What do they need to look like structurally and functionally to create space where talent isn't exiting at, massive droves. So excited about the conversation. But before we get there, I want you to tap in with Tristan. So we're going to do that. I'm going to be right back.
What's going on, Living Corporate? It's Tristan, and I want to thank you for tapping back in with me as I provide some tips and advice for professionals. Today, I want to talk about the truth behind your company's counteroffer. Have you ever been with an employer and you were performing extremely well, hitting all your goals and driving real results? Then you tried to negotiate something? Maybe it's a raise, a new computer, a flexible work schedule, tuition reimbursement, a leadership position, you name it. No matter what you request, the answer ends up being no. Sorry, I can't make that happen, or we don't do that here. You get so fed up that you begin job searching. Eventually, you get a message from a recruiter. After going through the interview process and discussing what you're looking for, they're willing to give you all that you're requesting. Once you sign the dotted line, you go into work and put in your 2 weeks notice. You thank them for the experience they provided, told your boss that you enjoyed working with them, and you let them know that this company was willing to give you the things you were seeking. only for your boss to say that you're an extremely valuable asset to the team and they don't want to lose you. They ask you to give them some time to see what they can do. After a day or two, they come back with that raise you were looking for, or now suddenly you can work from home 2 days a week. When you initially hear their response, you probably think, wow, that's great. Now I don't have to leave. Well, that's true. You don't. But take a moment and ask yourself, how did it all of a sudden become so easy to make this happen for you? Why didn't they offer you these things before when you requested them? Well, the answer is easy. They took you for granted. They made an assumption that you wouldn't take the opportunity to see what the job market was giving. Once other employers recognized the value of your talent, your company realized the mistake they were making. Can you stay? Absolutely, and in some cases you should. But always make sure to ask yourself, why didn't your current employer try to give you what you requested before? And why was this new company so ready to give you what you asked for right away? This tip was brought to you by Tristan of Layfield Resume Consulting. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Layfield Resume, or connect with me, Tristan Layfield, on LinkedIn.
Lars, what's going on, man? Welcome to the pod.
Zach, it's good to be here, man. I feel like it's been a hot minute since we last did one of these.
It has been a hot minute, man. Hey, so look, I'll say. Let me start off by saying this. I think you are the fourth white man on Living Corporate. So here we go. We got Drew, right? We got Drew, a very white guy. That's his Twitter name. We got Dr. Jonathan Metzl, author of Dying of Whiteness. And then we got Xander Laurie, who's the CEO of SurveyMonkey.
Yeah.
And then we got you.
I feel like I'm officially the least qualified white guy to be on the show as well. So let me set that bar for your listeners already.
Very funny. No, I'm excited, man. Like, this year has been something else. And for those who don't know, your background is in HR, people. Let's talk a bit about just what your perspective is of HR in this moment. And then, like, where do you see it going?
Yeah, that is, I will try to honor that question with a concise answer. I think probably the premise that I will start from is that I think, when I look at HR, HR is a pretty broad spectrum, right? And so there's old school HR, there's new school HR, there's a lot of HR in the middle. I tend to spend a lot of my time at that leading edge of HR, like those high performing, really progressive, forward thinking teams and organizations that are leading the way in terms of like what HR can and should be. But I want to own that I get that is a bubble that I'm in, because I spend a lot of my time there, and there's a lot of, more legacy transactional HR where I don't spend a lot of my time. And so my opinion and my perspective on where the field is tends to be colored by my immersion in that space. So I think I have to qualify my answer with that, just so you kind of know where I'm coming from. I think we're at a really interesting place right now collectively in the field, because, you have all of these transformative external factors that are opening doors for us to do things in a different way if we choose to step through them. And that to me is an incredible opportunity for HR. But we have to seize this moment. It's not going to happen unless we actually are proactive enough to kind of step through that door. And this is, as it relates to, internal equity and kind of social justice efforts within organizations. This is as it relates to thinking about hybrid work and remote work and those constructs, flexible work. We're kind of at this interesting place where we've always talked about the future of work. And I kind of view that a lot of ways as like abdicating our responsibility for dealing with this shit now. And now is the opportunity that we really have to kind of rewrite how we do things. And so I'm bullish on our potential, but it's a pretty pivotal time for us, because if we don't seize this, there's going to be a lot of pressure on a lot of HR teams to kind of revert back to, how things were in February of 2020. And, in my view, that world can't exist anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. And so if CEOs are pushing people to get back into that space, they're going to have some problems.
Now, you know that we as a network, we're focused on centering and amplifying the perspectives and experiences of Black and Brown people. Lars, like, why has HR been so unhelpful for those on the margins?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is if you look at the demographics of HR. HR is 70% ish white, 67% ish female. The gender I don't think is matter as the whiteness of the field. I think that you know historically and in many cases to this day, uh, we white practitioners specifically haven't done the work necessary in themselves to kind of understand these systems that are designed to kind of self perpetuate within companies and within businesses. And they're designed, in a way that it's designed to be, to not impact them, to not affect them. And so they haven't seen it. They haven't done the work to identify it and understand it. And because of that, they've been asleep. Honestly, they haven't been able to really try to kind of understand, the systems and the programs and how they do what they do, and that has had a tremendous adverse impact to those on the margins. And they just haven't, been willing to kind of do the work to understand the harm they're doing. And I'm optimistic that aspects of that is changing. Like I think the field of HR is having conversations around, racial justice and equity that I haven't seen in HR before, but there's, we have to own that there's so far to go, and that the efforts have to be sustained and frankly can't end. Like there's no timestamp, there's no destination for the amount of work that needs to be done.
To that end, I want to talk to you and get your perspective, on the last 12 months. But before I do that, just responding to what you're saying, it's interesting. I came into the corporate space. My first job was an HR manager at a store, at a major retailer. And I recall, I just recall wanting to really like innovate and build, and again, big box retailer. So they were like, no, there's a manual, right? We follow the manual.
Right.
Right. And so I just was so disillusioned by that. I got up out of there and got into org design and training, like, and jumped out of retail, went to oil and gas, like right after that. I was like, this is not for me. So I hear you about the fact that, this space has to just be more than essentially the guardians for the company, right? Like they kind of operate, HR oftentimes has a reputation, and I think rightfully so, is operating as this, again, like the gatekeepers around the company. They exist to mitigate risk. They exist to to quell the dissenters. To that end, I'm curious to get your perspective. We look at the last 12 months. Barry Williams just dropped a piece in Fast Company talking about a lot of those shows of allyship and commitments. A large majority of those things have fallen flat. I'm curious to get your
Yeah.
perspective, though. In the wake of the murder of George Floyd, and frankly, one of the most tumultuous election seasons we've ever seen, rounded out by an insurrection. It's not funny.
No shortage of events. I mean, yeah, it's like you have to kind of laugh to keep from crying, I think.
Right? It's just the absurdity of it all.
Yeah.
Or there's just how surreal it all is in real time. I'm curious. I'm curious to get your perspective on what conversations were you having? What were you observing in the HR space over this past year? Like, what did that look like for you, sitting where you sit?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for a lot of people, it was a time of introspection, and that didn't that didn't come right away. And like, look, I'll be really honest on my own journey. Like, I think after George Floyd's murder, like everybody, like I was outraged. And like, obviously this is not a new phenomenon. Like cops have been, killing Black and brown people in broad daylight for years. And I think that maybe it was part of the pandemic and we're all home, but it was just this, the experience I think was felt differently. I think in particular for white people that were, maybe hadn't been paying the level of attention that they should. For Black and brown people, they're like, yep, this is nothing new. This is something that is happening all the time. And, I think as people responded to those events, a lot of people were like, I want to do something, right? It was like the, white outrage. Oh, I got to do something about this. This is terrible. And I think for a lot of people, they came out kind of hot in that without necessarily doing the work themselves on educating themselves. And, if I'm honest, like I was probably one of those people too, where I came out and I'm like, I want to do something, like I want to be of value. And I think that I had a few friends kind of check me on that and they were absolutely right to do so. And so I kind of cooled off and said, you know what, like I need to do a lot of work. Like I need to do a lot of reading. I need to do a lot of listening. I need to really understand the space a bit better. And I think that, my kind of personal journey is probably something that, with a lot of companies, they came out and they made, commitments and pledges. And it was like this knee-jerk reaction to do something publicly, right? Without necessarily really thinking through how it would work, or even if it's the right thing to be doing, right? Is this additive? Is this even helpful? And so I think that, a lot of HR practitioners in the conversations that I've had kind of in that, and again, owning that it's that more progressive wing of HR, they went through similar experiences, where they kind of said they came out a bit hot and their companies are looking to them to, what are we going to do? And how are we going to, what kind of spaces are we going to create within our organizations? And they were under a lot of pressure from their CEOs and employees in some cases to make commitments, but they also were not really equipped to do so thoughtfully. And so I think, again, you ask kind of in the areas and the circles of CPOs that I'm typically connected with, that's kind of the process that I think that took. And I think through the work, and the work isn't like a moment of time. It's an ongoing thing. I think that they're trying to be more thoughtfully and informed and educated in helping kind of steer their executives towards programs that will really be thoughtful and additive and not performative, which I think a lot of them did in the early days.
And to that end, right? Like I remember on Living Corporate, I talked about this, like this, and I'll challenge you while saying this, even though I'm not talking about you specifically.
Yeah.
The desire to like very quickly get out there and do something is it's appreciated, but if it's not handled authentically, it's often like a way for folks just to kind of stroke their own egos. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine and I was talking about, it's like, I feel like sometimes white folks, they treat Black and brown people, in this context, specifically Black people, like we're like orcas at SeaWorld. And he was like, what do you mean by that? And I was like, like I can look at the orca show or like hear about how orcas are mistreated and be like, yo, that is wrong. Like that's wrong. Like orcas should not be in captivity. They're too smart. Like your enclosures are not big enough. And like there's these videos of you like harming them. And it's like really gross. And like there's this whole ocean, like just let them go. It's fine. Like we have Google. We can engage and appreciate orcas in different ways. We don't need SeaWorld and all this stuff. And I might even donate like to something that like, but at the end of the day, Lars, like none of that changes the fact that I don't think orcas are human beings.
Right.
Right. Like I'm not going to have an orca in my home. An orca's not going to date my daughter. I'm not going to have a conversation or even seek to understand to communicate with an orca. While orcas they might be intelligent for orcas, they're not as intelligent as I am. And I think like that that sentiment, that attitude, like I said, I think it's very similar to how a lot of people, corporations, since we like to treat corporations as people, corporations included, right?
Yeah.
Corporations included, like we treat black and brown people like they are like these big charity cases, like they're these amorphous theoretical causes to support, but that we don't really empathize with them because we don't really see them as human. We don't see them as equal to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I mean, I get that analogy. I think that particularly for white people who don't have a lot of black and brown people in their lives, like they can't, like they can sympathize, but I think a lot of people had a harder time empathizing and really trying to empathize and kind of understand just the vastness and the embeddedness of these like systems of white supremacy that are entirely designed to benefit them. And so in their mind, they're completely invisible. They don't even see them. They don't think about them because they live in that world and they live in those benefits every single day. And that is, I think, again, for people who are really focused on kind of learning and like that awareness was a wake up call for the people, hopefully I should say, for the people that had done the work to kind of really start to understand these broader systemic issues, frankly, that were all designed to support them and make their lives easier. And so that is, I think that is a bigger thing. Certainly for me, I think that was something that I became aware of. I mean, even looking at within HR, I'm somebody who was, speaking at conferences pretty regularly and had been doing that for about 8 years. And I had never, up until kind of last year, like really thought, okay, like who are these conference people promoting? Like who are the people who are regularly seen on the stage? And it was often white people. And I was one of them, And so I started thinking differently about how I participated in conferences and like how I, tried to use whatever influence I had to make sure that there were different people, different voices, different perspectives, different backgrounds, but frankly, more diversity and less whiteness on the stage.
It's interesting too, Lars. Like we are we are in this heightened moment of awareness and conscientiousness. I'm curious, like, and I've asked this question several times over the past, 8 months. Do you think this is a movement or you think it's a moment
You
for
know,
for HR?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I was and I'm responding to you saying that because I remember I was speaking to Tiffany Stevenson, who was Box's former head of D&I, on my podcast, and I was asking her like her perspective on the events of last year and kind of how that fits into the broader context of the civil rights movement, which is obviously multi-generational. And she kind of used this term of movements versus moments, and that the events were a moment in a much obviously longer standing movement towards social justice and equity. And so I think that it is for the field of HR, it was a very loud moment, but my hope is that in areas where it didn't already exist, it planted the seeds for a broader movement, and it has to, right? Like I think that we can't let the momentum that was gained, through all the pain and adversity that was amplified in 2020, move on, particularly as the field of HR is at this time where we really have an opportunity to rewrite like the playbook of HR, what we do, how we do it, how it works, who it serves. And that, to your point earlier, HR was rooted in as a compliance, out of compliance, right? It was a function oriented in risk aversion. And so, there's a well-earned reputation of the function always taking the side of the company, right? And not the employee. And I think if you look at, again, those modern kind of leading teams, it's a balance, and they find a way to represent both constituents. Does that mean they're perfect at doing that every time? Definitely not. But I think that they view their role as an HR leader, as a people executive, to be able to represent both interests and kind of be that balance between them at times when they're in conflict.
And see, I think my challenge, Lars, this is a separate we're gonna talk about it here, but like getting into it and like having an extended conversation, probably a separate pod. But it's like, see, I don't think that's possible.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it's possible because of the way that capitalism is set up. I don't think it's
Mhm.
possible to fully and authentically represent the interests of an employer while then also representing the working class, the disempowered minority, right? Like I don't think it's possible to represent the power majority and the disempowered minority simultaneously, or like figure out a middle ground, because so often in those situations, like the middle ground is some level of accountability for the power majority that they're just not going to be willing to give. Am I tripping
Yeah.
on that?
I don't know. Like I feel that I feel it's possible. I do feel it's possible. Do I feel it's common? Absolutely not. Do I feel that it's gonna work that way all the time? I don't. Like, I do think, to your point of moments and movements, like if this is an extended moment that leads to a type of movement where we're really thinking, holistically about the role of HR and people operations and work itself, right? Which I think we're kind of in that moment. We're really thinking about like what is work and how does it work? Like we're still, up until February of last year, we were still working under kind of industrial era constructs of work. Had to be in an office, had to be 9 to 5, had to be Monday through Friday. Again, I'm generalizing roles. Like obviously some roles don't fit that category, but many of us did.
Right.
And that's starting to shift. So I'm in my line, like I've got to be hopeful, and I've got to try. I see, whatever role I play here is like trying to push those conversations and those practices to be able to find that balance, because I think, you can't, if you view your role in HR as solely serving the business and the company, then, and not, the employees are just like, how do you make them fit into the company structures that the employer wants? Like, I think that that's just, I don't know how that continues to work long-term, especially in this environment of change that we're in right now.
No,
So I'm hopeful.
yeah, so I appreciate that, and I hear you. I think I'm doubtful about the balance, but I'm also open to seeing an example of it happening. Right?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit back and say it's not. I'm gonna fold my arms and be like, it's like no way. Be stiff necked about it, but I'm curious about it. Right?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, look, let's be honest. Like you have all the reason to be skeptical about that working. You're going to have to see it to believe it. And I'm hopeful that
I
we'll be in that
will.
position.
No, 100%. I mean, you're absolutely right. Right? Like I have 11 years of work experience. No, 10 years. Ooh, okay. Don't age myself too quick. 10, 10 years of work experience that makes me that draws a high level of skepticism. Let's talk about this though. Your podcast, your org, Redefining HR. We're coming into a season where we're talking about returning to office. You notice I didn't say return to work because everybody's been working.
Yep.
But there's this pressure to return to the office. Where did you see HR going in this new context where there are folks not returning to the office? They don't want to go back to work. Folks are offering bonuses for people to return. Of course, as you know, people are quitting left and right,
Yeah.
prioritizing their own mental health. And their families, finding other things to do, gig working, and living differently so that they can just be home. Where do you see HR operating and playing in this new future?
Yeah. I mean, look, we're going to be front and center in all of it, right? Like, I think if they're obviously setting aside the roles that don't have an opportunity to work remotely, right? And that's a sizable part of the workforce. So let's, kind of acknowledge that, set that aside for a minute. For the employees that were able to work, and what do you want to call them, knowledge workers or whatever, but people who are able to work from home and they didn't really have to be in office. Like, I think most of those companies are hybrid by default now. And what we have to get away from in HR and business in general is like absolutism thinking, right? It was like, we got to be all co-located. We've got to be all distributed. We've got to be all high. That's not necessarily what everybody wants. People want choice. People want flexibility. And for some people, that means like they're dying to get back into an office 5 days a week. For other people, they'll never go back into an office. and the majority are somewhere in between. And so, the exciting, but albeit, probably super stressful and difficult from a management standpoint in terms of HR, is like creating flexible constructs for work, right? Like we're not used to that. We're used to kind of playbooks around like, this is how we do performance. This is how we do compensation. This is how we do recruiting. And now like those playbooks don't really fit. We have to, not only do we have to kind of rewrite how we think about them, but we also need a couple versions of them to account for flexibility that our employers want. So to me, it's like, I had a conversation with somebody on LinkedIn earlier today. I was like, look, the future of work is choice. Like it's choice. Like that's what employees want. Survey after survey is saying like that choice is ultimately what they want. And very few people, some people want to go back in office, but very few people like their priority is to be back in office 5 days a week. I think going through this humanity shaping event with the pandemic and being home with our families, like for many people, their priorities have shifted, and it's not just about like work. They want to have some balance. They want to be able to have more time with their families or themselves, or they're more mindful of their own, mental health and stress levels and want to take better care of themselves. So I think we'll be emerging out of this, like as a society and as a workforce with different needs and different expectations. And so the field of HR and all of those things is going to be front and center in designing that either well or horribly. And I think companies that struggle with that are companies that have, old school CEOs who are pushing to get everybody back in an office before they're ready. They're going to have a really hard time holding on to talent.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna tell you, like, a bunch of stuff can't be true at the same time. Like the whole idea of like two things can be true. That's true. I agree. And I also understand that there is, there are types of work that, folks are, that it's still somewhat needed in person.
Yep.
But come on, man, it's 2021. Right? Like there's certain things we don't have to be in office. And like so much of this is, I think, I'm really hoping and praying that, as millennials and Gen Z get into more senior decision making level, truly like C-suite level roles, that some of this thinking and this desire to just like lord over people or like see you. Like you don't have to see me for me to do my accounting. Like I can do accounting anywhere. I can do
Right.
some of these jobs. It's like, bro, like I have a computer, we have Zoom, we have phones, we have email, we have, different types of teaming platforms and tools. Like why we don't have to be in person for this. I think
Yeah.
your whole point around like, options resonates with me because some folks do like I need to compartmentalize. I want to go away to work and then come home to rest. And I'm not privileged enough to have a space that I can dedicate for work. Maybe I don't want to do that with my home. Flexibility is important. And I would hope that organizations can start connecting these dots. And I'm gonna be honest, every time these companies they falter a little bit, or their business takes a hit because they're losing people, I applaud, Lars, because I'm for the people. Like because at a certain point it's like, look, y'all are making enough money. And guess what, man? Like we talk about this whole free market system. If you have to browbeat people at your office for you to be successful or sustainable, you know what? I'm not really tripping about y'all existing or not. I don't really care. Right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think too, like I was on, I remember in the early days, like when the book came out and I was doing a lot of webinars and stuff. And, some of the people were like, well, how do you, how do you kind of measure and kind of observe productivity if somebody's remote? I'm like, how the hell do you do that when they're in the office? Like, what's the difference? Like, because you physically saw them sitting at a desk, you could automatically just assume that they were banging out spreadsheets. I was like, it's, we have to get better at measuring like output and work. And like, I don't care where you do it. I don't care when you do it. Like, I care about what gets done. And like that, we kind of came from measuring more of like, butts in seats than the output and quality of work.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's going to start to change. And I think to me, like a topic that I'm super intrigued about right now is kind of optimizing asynchronous work. And the idea of like, I think if the companies that really master that and do that really well, like they're going to unlock so much potential. And I'm super excited. Like I'm trying to kind of adapt some of my own kind of habits and communication and the way that I work towards more of an async, default where I'm telling people like, hey, let's get the call. Like, no, I don't think this needs to be a call. Like, let's just trade some emails or I'll send you a video. Or like, I think there's ways that we can do that isn't just like stacking meeting on meeting on meeting and sitting on Zoom all day.
No, 100%. And that's the other thing too, is like, you and I both know that we don't have to be on a call, or I don't have to be in front of you to get this work done. Right. Yeah. But it kind of goes back though, Lars, to like, and I'm gonna be like, I'm really like, the more I've been reading different books and challenging myself to be more of a systems thinker. It's like, just where does this mindset come from? I think it has something to do with capitalism and scarcity, and just this idea of like, I don't just those capitalism and scarcity mindsets, like they foster mistrust. They foster, right? Like, it's hard. I can't trust you to go away, do what you say you're going to do, and come back and get it done. And then on top of that, some of us has varying levels of addiction to comfort, right? So, because sometimes like, okay, look, maybe you didn't get it done. Now we're gonna have to have a conversation about why you didn't get it done, and we can just have that conversation. You're held accountable for that. We have a plan going forward, and we do it, whatever that is. And I think that I would hope that, and I'm still just hopeful. I dare to be hopeful that organizational cultures can get there, so that folks can work asynchronously. I just, like the world is just too big. We have too much technology, and the world's also too connected at the same time. It's big, but it's also really small. It's smaller than it's ever been. Like, we have to figure it out, man.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think, the whole pandemic was a pretty, strong forcing function to get us there. And I think there's a lot of people who will never go back. And I mean, I'm also really intrigued about it when you think about the emergence of remote and distributed and hybrid, and it's going to take on, a variety of forms, and that's fine. Like I think employees will be in a position where they can choose the work environment that's going to fit the lifestyle they want. Like they're not going to be boxed into, well, this is how we work and this is it. And again, there's a lot of privilege with that statement. I want to own that. But like for people who are, tech workers, or they're, salespeople, are in kind of demanding jobs that are, by default can be done anywhere. If they don't want to go back into an office, they won't have to. And I think it's interesting, like what that leads to in terms of time. Like, I think you'll see more people in, chasing that dream of like a passion project or a side hustle or whatever. I think you'll see more people, spending more time with families and creating more, memories and events and activities there. So I think that the overall outcome of that is net positive for everybody. I think it's just, there, as to your point earlier, like there will definitely be some capitalistic pressure, as you're already seeing from like, Jamie Dimon or other CEOs are like, I saw an article 2 weeks ago, of all people, the CEO of WeWork was like, you can tell who's really motivated at work by the people who want to come into an office. Man, get out of here with that.
Out of here. No, Lars, I hated that, man. I read that. I was like, that's disgusting. Like,
it was
like your motivation is clearly financial. Like, you're a real estate company. Yeah. Right. Of course you want people to show up in these floating offices. The irony of that is that WeWork is supposed to be it's a flexible work site space. So like the idea is what's stopping me from working at home? Like the logic of that just made me so angry. But anyway, look, before I let you go, let's talk about redefining HR. Let's talk about, the work that you're doing and just what you're excited about over the next year, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm fired up for the opportunity that I think HR has right now, and I think for redefining HR, it started as the podcast. It kind of evolved into a book, and now it's evolved into this new accelerator platform that is those things plus a cohort. Kind of CPO accelerator program, courses, and then I'll be launching a newsletter and community soon. So like, I think for me, I've been kind of building these global networks of people who are operating at the at the leading edge of HR. And like, that's been hugely beneficial for me in my editorial work and podcasts or whatever else. But I want to, with the accelerator platform now, I really want to start taking a more active role in helping shape like the next generation of CHROs and CPOs and kind of connect them with ideas and practices that they'll need to build modern, organizations. And so, yeah, I'm excited about that. It's a new thing. Like I haven't, kind of building, I've been building communities for a long time. I've been building, not really training material, but similar types of things. But this is, I'm in this position now where it's like all the things that are my kind of personal passions and interests and desires for what I want to do for the field are all aligning in this just pretty cool way. So I'm really excited about it.
Look, I'm thankful for you. I've always said, it's going to take like this, it's going to take coordination, right? Between internal forces and external forces to really drive equity and drive systemic change. HR has to be redefined. It has to be, I know we had Lori Ruderman on the show. Some months ago. She's really big on like HR needs to be completely dismantled, and I vibe with that. I think whatever words you want to use, though, it needs to be there. It needs to just systemically and fundamentally change. And so the work that you're doing is critical for that. And I'm excited. I'm thankful for your work. I'm excited for us to continue to talk. And it's important, man, that we have folks of all hues, but particularly white folks in these spaces to advocate, right? And to like really be those voices of like thinking future, thinking inclusively, thinking intersectionally, and then also having the humility to go, I need to bring somebody else in here, but I know that you need to hear this message, right? Like that's really important. So I appreciate you, Lars.
Yeah.
We look, you were a friend of the show before you came on the show, but you're definitely a friend of the show now. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, Zach, I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and looking forward to more conversations and collaboration.
All right, man. Peace. And we're back. Yo, shout out to Lars. Thank you so much. It's important. I really want y'all to understand, right, that human resources has to change, right? So this is for everybody listening. For the employees or people who are looking to get into the workforce, you need to understand that you have the right to expect more from your HR professionals. And for the HR professionals and executives listening, hey, your role has to change. Right? So often human resources acts as this gatekeeper of sorts, this power hoarder, but really they act as the police of an organization. They act as the enforcement arm of the executive interests of that company. And it's important for you to understand, if you're listening to this and you're an HR leader or you're some type of executive, your role will not be sustainable in this new future, right? Like we're talking about this whole thing around the Great Resignation, and other folks have framed it in different ways, but ultimately it's employees are really seeking and understanding their power, right? And, being on the side of the person with the most power or the group with the most power or the group that historically has been oppressive will not be sustainable for you in the future. And so that doesn't mean that HR has to function as some activist arm looking to destroy the companies they work at, but their role should be much more employee-centric and focused on advocacy for the employee. And there's a way that can work in a working context that is functional. But when the premises that we work from are capitalistic and by that nature exploitative, that's where you find rub and friction. So again, HR needs to be structurally reimagined. Work is being structurally reimagined right now. That's why you're seeing all these different shifts and people going to different places. It's because we're actually rethinking what it means to work and what we want from our jobs. And so what I really want folks to take away from this as they listen to this is if you're in those positions, those HR positions, that you will be left behind if you're not challenging and reimagining how you show up differently. Okay. It is critical. It is critical. Shout out to Madison Butler, writer for Living Corporate. She said something though, and this is a sentiment that's been said by several people, so I don't want to act like no one else has said this, but she tweeted this, and I want to give her kudos for this. Is she said that HR has to have some type of understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion. They have to have some understanding of power dynamics. They have to have some understanding of just like how different people, non-white people, navigate these spaces. It's critical. HR has been historically white and historically white female, and it's important that that folks really challenge even that. HR itself has been fairly exclusive to everyone that is not white. So, all of this being said, rant aside, we have to redefine HR. I'm going to shout out Lars again. Make sure, again, you check out the links in the show notes, explore, learn about Lars' platform, what he's doing. His podcast is super fire. We had a really good conversation. And we'll catch you next time. Make sure you give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you check out the merch. Make sure you just check out the Living Corporate channel. We got a lot of stuff popping, y'all. New pods, new shows dropping later next month. And I'm excited for y'all to check them out. So just keep your eyes peeled. More to come. Talk to you soon. Peace.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.